It was time to head north, following the Rockies out of Utah. The fastest route is to follow Highway 15 into Idaho, eventually crossing over towards Jackson. I went for a more scenic route, past Bear Lake and through some flatlands on the Utah-Wyoming border, and then north on Highway 89, right up to the front door of Grand Teton National Park. A roadside rock served as seating and table for a light lunch of bread and cold cuts, a lunch made grand by the spectacular view. I decided to spend more time off the freeway this trip compared to last year. Many secondary roads across the West are just as fast as highways, but can offer better views. I know a lot of people try to avoid highways altogether, and that's fine, but I find the steady hum of the perfect asphalt quite therapeutic. That and many highways are incredibly scenic, especially in this part of the country. But not today. Curving B-roads undulating up and down with the terrain, occasionally revealing epic scenic vistas of valleys and peaks. I think everyone should take a road trip in this part of the world at least once. I've driven in some pretty epic places in my life, but there are stretches of road in Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming, really all over the Rocky Mountains, that rival just about anywhere. I also stopped at a rather unique airport, Alpine, which is probably the least unique name for anything in a mountainy area. What makes it different, you might be able to spot. Instead of hangars, this airport has homes. Or I guess to put it more accurately, these homes have hangars. Garages for luxury cars too, of course, but also heated storage for your private plane. Fly in here and stay at your weekend mansion, or one of them, take in some skiing at Jackson Hole, head to the mountains to hunt humans for sport, whatever it is rich people do. For one of Alpine Air Park's starter hangar homes, expect to pay around $3 million. For a home your neighbors won't sneer at, you smelly bourgeois urchin, expect to pay over $15. Jackson is a weird town. The buildings are all fairly humble, but they house high-end restaurants, jewelry stores, and seemingly on every corner some kind of art store. Money comes here, clearly. My motel was nice. Keep heading north out of town, and soon the mountains that give Grand Teton National Park its name rise into view. They're all the more impressive due to the flat plain on either side of the road. Flatness for miles, then these snow-capped vertical daggers of Purple Mountain's majesty hove into view. The weather and sun are perfect for photos. Little fluffy clouds, azure blue skies. The sun is warm, but the air is cool. Grand Teton is one of the National Park System's drive-through parks, which is to say you can see many of the major scenic sites without having to leave your car, or at worst, make a short walk from the parking lot. I love this accessibility. The beauty of nature should be experienced by everyone, not just those who have the luck, income, and time to be expert hikers. I did a few short hikes in the park. I'd had a pretty sedentary few months, and the lowest parts of the park are still 6,500 feet above sea level. I don't do well with altitude. So I was wheezing just walking along the Jackson Lake shoreline. I did hike up, yes up, to Taggart Lake, with the sun and the heat and the total lack of oxygen. The heat part might have just been me. The lake was covered in ice. This isn't my first visit to Grand Teton. A long time ago I was moving out to Los Angeles, just 2 months after graduating college. My roommate and I had no money, and we were eager to start the first chapter of our adult lives. We passed through the park, enough to be wowed by it all. I knew then I wanted to come back, but I had no idea it would take over 20 years. I wonder what that impossibly young Jeff would think of current Jeff. I think he'd be impressed. I know he'd like the Miata. He'd be really curious why I had a scar that runs the entire length of my torso. Do us both a favor, past Jeff. Buy Apple stock. Oh, and global warming is gonna suck half the water out of this lake. As some of you might know, a portion of my income comes from doing photo tours of interesting museums all around the world. Believe it or not, there was one such museum east of Grand Teton. I'll add a link about it in the description below. The drive there and back, however, was one of the greatest sections of road I've ever experienced. Just magnificent. It's called the Wyoming Centennial Scenic Byway, following US Route 26 east from the national park to the Wyoming town of Dubois. The highway weaves its way between hills, across valleys, all with stunning vistas of the Absaroka and Teton ranges. As impressed as I was while driving east, it was a drive back the next day that secured it as one of the greatest drives of my life. Despite being in the 50s, the sun was strong enough that I put the top down, cranked up the seat heaters, and blasted tunes as I made my way up and over the snow-covered Togwotee Pass and the Continental Divide at 9,655 feet. There's just something wonderful about driving a tiny rear-wheel drive convertible while surrounded by snowdrifts the size of buildings. I was heading back westward because just north of Grand Teton is the first and probably most famous national park, Yellowstone. 2.2 million acres of some of the most incredible and unique landscapes in the world. More than half the world's active geysers are in Yellowstone. Then there's the bison, bears, waterfalls, canyons, and more. I had scheduled several days to visit the park, and I'm glad I did. Not only is the park itself enormous, but even during my early summer visit, it was crowded. Traffic and limited parking greatly slowed my exploration. I figured I'd start with the park's most iconic attraction, Old Faithful. It's a highly regular geyser that erupts every 90 minutes or so. It's impressive, sure, but the entire area has multiple geysers and other hydrothermal features, all with their own bubbling beauty and sulfur stink. The area is laced with boardwalks, not just to make it all more accessible, but so you don't wander into oblivion. Every year, some idiot steps off the path, gets too close, intentionally or not, and falls in. I'll spare you the details, but scalded isn't the word you should be thinking about, it's dissolved. Okay, I guess I didn't spare the details. Which is to say, I stuck to the path. As far as national parks go, this area was extremely built up. Not surprising given the attraction. Multiple huge buildings, including a cafeteria, visitor center, and hotel, give it a more touristy vibe than most national parks. I know some people avoid popular spots with their huge parking lots and endless crowds. That's fine, but there's often a reason these places are popular. Old Faithful is cool, as are all the other geysers and forbidden hot tubs in this area. Each national park is different, of course, but you can lump them into two general categories: drive-through parks and location parks. As I mentioned before, a drive-through park like Grand Teton, the Badlands, Teddy Roosevelt, and many others let you see much of the park's beauty from your car as you slowly drive through. If there's something you want to see up close, you can park and hike to it. Location parks, my name for it, have specific locations where there's something to see. You drive to it, park, see it, drive to the next location. These categories may seem similar, but aren't in practice. Yellowstone is a good example of a location-type park. Much of what you want to see is connected by tree-lined roads. There's just not much to see between those locations. Just a green blur that could exist pretty much anywhere on Earth. Then you get to a parking lot, wait for a space, then see the attraction, then repeat. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of natural beauty to see throughout Yellowstone, but much of it is far less accessible from the main roads. I want to be clear, this isn't a criticism, just an observation. Every national park is good. There's a reason why it's a national park. What you often do see as you're making your way through Yellowstone is the local wildlife. This is an attraction in itself. Often you'll see a knot of traffic with cars pulled to the side in a seemingly random location. You should definitely stop. There's usually something to see. Bears, grizzly and black, bison, and more all call the park their homes. Seeing these massive animals up close-ish is an incredible opportunity. Unfortunately, some people don't appreciate the danger of this opportunity. If someone's only experience with animals is of the domestic kind, they might not realize that a bison can kill you just as easily as a bear. It just won't eat you afterwards. A small consolation. Despite countless signs, warnings when entering the park, warnings on every map and info placard, people still get way too close to wild animals. Even during my visit, I repeatedly saw people try to take a photo, realize the wide-angle lens on their phone wasn't going to give them the shot they wanted, and then they start moving closer and closer. Despite the animal giving clear, even to a city boy like me, was not pleased with this infringement on its personal space, and could you please not? Which is to say, get a telephoto adapter for your phone, or a camera with a decent zoom. It will save your life. I'll leave a link in the description below to an article I wrote about this. Some of what you're seeing here is in the north of the park, but before the unprecedented floods of this summer. The heaviest damaged roads, the ones that largely got washed away, were even farther north, near that entrance to the park. The Grand Prismatic Spring doesn't look real. In fact, it's one of the least real-looking, real places I've ever been. Words can barely do it justice. So I guess it's a good thing you're looking at it in greater than HD resolution. It's the third largest hot spring in the world, after one in New Zealand and one in Dominica. It bubbles up around 560 gallons, aka 2,100 liters, of 160F, 70C degree water every minute. The colors come from microbes that live at the edges of the warm, mineral-rich water. The colors change throughout the year. In the middle of the park is the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. Or maybe a better pronunciation would be the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, because look at it. It's gorgeous. I saw most of what I wanted to see at Yellowstone during my visit, but on what would have been my last day, the weather took a turn, bringing snow and freezing rain, despite being early summer. I hunkered down in my hotel, getting some work done instead. I also mentally prepared for the next day, which would be one of my longest driving days, from the town of West Yellowstone in Idaho, north across Montana, nearly to the Canadian border, to the town of West Glacier and the entrance to, wait for it, Glacier National Park. It was going to be a long drive and a rather perilous one, through mountains in snowy weather in a tiny sports car with rear-wheel drive. Adventure! Scary, scary adventure. I'll leave you with my closest encounter. I pulled over to let a trio of bison cross the road, and cross they did, right in front of my little car. Had they cared to, they could have seriously messed up my little aluminum and plastic conveyance. But care they did not. So long, my fluffy forest friends. Until next time.